Good morning, and welcome to another episode of Conversations with Buddy. Like always, we drop a new podcast every Friday morning with a new story that will impact someone, and we hope that someone is you. I just want to say thank you again to all the listeners each week who take the time to hear the stories of our guests. If you'd please take a moment to subscribe to our podcast, give us a review, and share this podcast with your friends, family, and on your favorite social media platforms. We want to get these messages out to the people and to impact the world one testimony at a time. This morning, I'm excited and grateful, as always, to introduce my guest. He's actually a second-time guest. Welcome, Mitch Andersen.
Thanks, buddy. Love it, man.
It's great to have you on again, man. I loved our last podcast. I thought we had a great time, and I wasn't sure when we would see you again, but we had a conversation, a month ago, and you have some new things going on in your life. So we're gonna start over and hear a new part of your life because, well, it's been 6 months.
Yeah, no, I totally, I'm grateful. Can't thank you enough, man.
Dude. So for those listeners out there, if you have not listened to Mitch's first podcast, go back to, I think, sometime in January, listen to Mitch's first podcast so you get kind of an idea who Mitch really is, because we're going to pick up from where we left off and figure out where he's at today. So Mitch, the things that were kind of on your heart and mind, you started a new Bible study with some guys. We'll talk about Captain's Log. That's the name of it, right?
Totally, yeah.
And that's a spin-off of your book, Attributes of Manhood.
For
Is
sure.
that right?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, exactly.
Gotcha. You and your wife did have a baby since we last met, because last time your wife was pregnant, and then in April 20th, you have a new baby, a little baby girl. You're going to tell us about Selah Grace. We're going to talk about some interviews you've been having on the streets. I love seeing those videos, by the way. So if by the way, all the listeners out there, go find Mitch on Instagram. He's got a lot of great video content. Goes back a long ways, actually, to early music days. I think 2010, 2011.
Yep.
But I love the questions you're asking men, even young men, old men, on the streets. What does it mean to be a man? Something like that. Is that the question?
For sure, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. It's evolved, but it's definitely, it's kind of the core. You know, you start out with some kind of vision, and then at this point, there's this aim. I don't want to miss the forest through the trees, and the forest is Jesus, you know. And so that's kind of how it has evolved. You kind of take maybe a high point of culture, and then you're saying, actually, but back at the core, you know, it starts with Him. And so that's kind of where things are evolving to, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, totally. Well, you had invited me to one of your Bible studies, and it's on a Monday night at 7:30.
Yep. Yeah.
So I made it to one so far.
So kind of you.
No, it was fun. And when I was there, I met your dad, Keith.
Yes.
And so when you and I showed up this morning, we were talking about working out, because you look like you've been working out. Like, you look like you're in great shape. I'm like, what's going on, dude? So tell me what you told me. You had to join a courthouse, and then
for sure.
So walk me through that real quick, and then we'll kind of dive into the story.
Yeah, for sure. I as far as we wanted to have a membership to a swimming pool, and so to do that, you have to have a membership to a club, and I had to justify paying for the membership in order to have access. And so that was kind of in a nutshell saying, hey, babe, if we're going to do this, I also got to work out. And so that was kind of the play, and it's worked out, you know. Okay. And what's cool is, you know, nobody can see us, so I can be as jacked as you say I am, you know.
Yeah. Dude, your arms are. Either you got the tight shirt on, or you got bigger arms. I'm not sure.
Hey, if you want to say, you know, I look like Arnold, I don't know if you guys have seen the new Netflix documentary, but hey, go ahead. Nobody would know. Okay,
all right. I love it, man. But you were saying that you were actually, before working out, you were actually a runner, more of a runner.
Yes, yeah.
But then you talked about your dad a little bit. So tell me about your running history. Then I want to hear the story about your dad, because I know a little bit. Well, you're going to talk about Steve Prefontaine.
Well, yeah, in a nutshell, that's kind of the main claim. He did get to race against him. He was sick with mono when he competed against Prefontaine. And so my argument is that he would have won. Dad says otherwise. You know, he's much, you know, he was the athlete, right? Yeah. But in my head, he could do no wrong. The stories that I had heard. So, you know, in high school, he was actually the 5th fastest man in the nation.
Wow.
Got a full ride to the University of Washington. Was running the 2 mile in, I think it was 8:40. So he had splits of 4:20.
That's sick.
Yeah, he was just back, you know, that was 35, 40 years ago. So he was definitely at the apex of kind of collegiate competition and all that good stuff. So, yeah.
A 2-minute mile in 8:40. That's a good mile for me. I'd be happy to run a mile in 8:40.
Yeah. Well,
I'm not joking.
No. I hear you. So for me, as far as running goes, it was just that was the norm because my dad, he I can remember him always running 4 miles a day was just a drop in the bucket, And so for me, it's like, hey, this is just what you do as a man, and so it's good for your heart, good for your brain.
Yeah,
a little tough on your joints, but you work through that, right? So no, it's good.
So your dad went to what high school?
He was Battleground Washington.
Okay.
So I think that's Battleground High, I think is the name.
So it makes sense he went to UW.
Yep.
And
for sure.
And then Steve Prefontaine, Coos Bay guy.
Yes.
My mother-in-law went to high school with him, I'm pretty sure.
Oh, no way.
Yeah, in Coos Bay. So my wife's from Coos Bay, North Bend. And did Prefontaine go to Oregon? Is that where he...
That's what I know. According to his history, yeah. I'm pretty sure. Yep, yeah. I think so.
What an interesting story, but what a stud.
Yeah, no, he definitely had it on American soil. He could do no wrong.
Yeah,
and, it's unfortunate his demise, his end.
Yeah.
But it doesn't take away from the intrigue of his story for sure.
So your dad was pretty competitive.
Very. Yeah.
How does that relate to you? Or did you grow up? Remind me of your siblings. How many?
Yeah, so I had two sisters, and then we adopted when I was 14 a brother. Jeremy.
Your sisters, younger, older?
One older, one younger.
Okay, so you're a middle.
I'm a middle.
You're a middle.
Yeah.
So that has to be pretty competitive. You got two sisters on both sides of you.
Yep.
So poor Mitch.
Yeah, well, I mean, definitely not poor. Had I had more brothers, at the younger years, I probably would have been even more competitive.
Yeah.
So they definitely, in a good sense, mellowed me out. In psychology, the masculine identity is far more disagreeable. The feminine identity is far more agreeable. And so when you take a biological man that is more disagreeable on that, and you stick him with some agreeable women, he kind of gets the rough edges melded out. So maybe if I was 80% disagreeable, they gave me 20 or 30% more agreeableness. So now I'm more of a balance, I think.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Why is that? Why are men more disagreeable? Explain that one.
Yeah, totally. I mean, I obviously have to go to the credentialed, right? So Jordan Peterson and Jonathan Haidt, both those obviously are there's a psychologist and then obviously a sociologist professorship. They got many books, and it's just according to their research, that as they have seen. And I think Jordan Peterson, I can't speak for Jonathan Haidt, but Dr. Peterson would probably allude it to be nurturing biologically, for the mother. So the first 5 years, there's an agreeableness that has to be there. If it was all masculine dominated, we probably would all be Spartans. Like children would be, oh, you're crying, slap in the face, and a newborn, and I'm thinking of, Salem, my little girl. It's like, what, you can cry for 4 or 5 hours, and you're just going to work through it. Now, maybe, is there some benefit in a cold world that we live in that maybe that's could be a benefit? But no, obviously that's very harsh and cold. So there is this thing that God knew, I think, is that hunter-gatherers, so men would have to go out, take on the harsh reality of world. Disagreeability is works in that favor, as opposed to the safety of the home.
The nurturing.
Exactly, nurturing would be there. So that's just off the cuff, I think.
So you think it's important for mom and dad to stay together and raise their kids together, and there's a benefit?
So vital.
Okay, yeah.
So vital, yeah.
But in America, or probably in the world, what's the divorce rate?
Well, it's funny because off the cuff, we kind of say it's 50%, right? 1 out of 2 marriages end in divorce. Yeah. I've heard that it's actually more closer to 36% end in divorce, so it's not as drastic.
I've heard that as well.
But I think simultaneously is that far less people are getting married and they're just living together. So it's, you could say maybe that divorce rate has gone down because the younger generation, millennials, have seen, hey, my parents, they just got divorced. Why would I waste the time? Why not, we'll say we love each other, we'll commit to each other, and we're good, and then there's no divorce. So obviously that's all speculative, but
yeah. Well, I think you're right. I've heard the same thing where 1 and 2 are in divorce, the marriages, and then I've heard more like the mid-30s. But then the question is, how many marriages are actually on the brink of divorce? I think that's a question is, and what are we as men doing to work through that?
Yeah.
I'm not saying we're fully responsible, but leadership does come from men, as we lead our wives, and that's tough.
Yeah.
As a man, I don't always want to be the leader. I just want to take a back row. Would you agree on that? Are men somewhat by nature passive. Is that a fair?
Well, it's funny because I think that you stick a man outside the world and he'll go gung ho, and I try to understand what that's all about and why that's the case. But it would be safe to reason that the moment he steps inside the four walls of his home, he kind of shuts down. He wants the couch. He wants to click on the TV and kind of zone out.
Comfort zone.
What?
Comfort zone.
Yeah, comfort zone. Maybe that's, that could be a thing. It's kind of this, many times the man, like the bosses that have ruled me in my spheres of influence and when I go to work in the career world, I would say are the shell of the men that you would see them at home. Like they're not what they are at home. And maybe that is because we're just exhausted, right? It's done. You're right. They're just shutting off,
Right. Is that a good enough excuse to just shut off and be passive at home?
Well, this is the sadness, because the times where our children, who we are arguably the most people we're ever going to impact, need us most, is that 2 to 3 hours, right, in the evening, when it's like, listen, kid number 1, kid number 2, I can't remember your name, or go, just go. I don't have anything left to give you,
right.
And also, there's really no benefit from you. You're only a burden right now, and it's so unfortunate that this is where our culture finds herself. And I see the pull inside. I definitely see the pull inside. I can't wait for 7 o'clock to come where I can. You know what, kids? It's quiet time. It's bedtime. You go to bed, and then it's me time, right?
Yeah.
And obviously, this benefit that God knew when He designed the family was. No, this is going to pull you out of yourself. You're going to have to deny yourself. And I think this is why it's so awesome when as a culture, and obviously we've missed this, dives into bearing, I'll use an antiquated word, but bearing as many kids as you feel reasonably that your family can handle. For us, I think it's 4. I think that's where where we're stopping. I like that little squeak there. That must be the exhaustion,
Exactly.
But so this is where we're trying to, and obviously it's between what you're doing, buddy, and I think many men are rising up where it's like, no, you know what? God has called us to be most active when we're with our families, right? To be most vigilant and ready, and everything should be channeled and kind of honed and geared there. Hence why, Attributes of Manhood, the book had been written. Hence why started that devotional, Captain's Log. Trying to get in the conversation. Is it the kind of impact that the world might say is, oh, now it's happening? I think it's the kind of impact that God wants, calculated for the type of impact that I can handle. And I don't think any man knows what he can handle. I don't want to get off on a rabbit trail, but one of the Captain Log's Bible studies, we had spoken of the faith of Noah. And the question that we begged there was, what is your ark? Trying to quicken men to ask this question, what is your ark, right? And, we can sometimes we can think it took about 120 years, but historically it actually was from 55 to 75 years was what the ark actually took. And as I was contemplating this further, is that when Noah got the call to build his ark, they had no idea what rain was. They had seen, obviously, bodies of water, and it was the dew of the ground, right? Okay. And so what is so interesting with this is for Noah, he would say, well, is it going to be a massive spring of dew that's going to flood the earth? When he's called out to build this ark, are the bodies of water going to come inland? Like, what are you going to do? What do you mean open the heavens? How do I know that's going to come? And so it's like this, I was trying to implore men to think when we're called to something that we're going to have to believe our whole lives for, that's an impossibility, it would be likened to, and I liken it to this, when Steve Jobs built the cell phone, there were no cell towers. If I'm correct, I'm not an engineer, but I believe there were no cell towers. There was different kinds of power lines. Yeah. So there's this, and I know Steve Jobs was supposedly a Buddhist, right? But the correlation here that I thought was so powerful is that sometimes God will call you to something that you don't even have the avenue to be able to accomplish the actual object of the faith. So, for Noah, it could have looked like rain was needed, and what would that even look like? Well, Steve Jobs had to step out in faith to build the cell phone without even the cell tower. Yeah. And so there is this fascinating thing that I was wrestling in my own mind, was that many times the faith of Noah could look like, in the end, your fans have all died, right? There was nobody else on earth. There was only 6 of them. Or, yeah, I think I did the math right there. 6 or 8 of them. And what is so interesting about that is that so many times we think of impact as like, well, I'm going to have a bunch of fans, right? But at the climax of Noah's faith, everybody disappeared, right? Everybody was gone. And simultaneously, Noah saves the future of the globe, right? Yeah. And so this thought in my head is like, no. Our faith needs to be so drastic that the outcome is completely in God's hands. And the destiny of your faith could be that you actually experience the least amount of celebrity status, the least amount of anything, which at this point I'm likening to being a father in your home. Mm-hmm. 0 accolades, 0 praise. Very few of our children, and I believe this for my kids, right, but are going to end up like Michael Jordan. Like, we know Jordan's father really invested in him heavily, but not all of our kids are going to end up that way, right? Or even the gratitude that comes back. And so for me, it's like we have to be willing to pour an endless amount of faith into our family, into our kids for 0 praise, 0 accolades. And it's this faith to see the future of the destiny God has on our lives. I know there's a rabbit trail, but that's this thing that's just been so quickening me of what, kind of where God is trying to channel men in their homes, in their spheres of influence, right? To really change and impact the world. Not for our glory, right? Everybody faded when Noah achieved the object of his faith, right? Yeah. The ark and all that. And I think that's we can grasp so much from that as men, in our quest and pursuit of God.
So something I was thinking about is God doesn't call the qualified, he qualifies the called. As a dad, I don't feel qualified. I don't know about you, and did Noah feel qualified to build this great big ark? Yeah. And did he just move forward in faith day by day? And so, man, that was good. I love that story of Noah. And I might have been at that Bible study. That was a Bible study I think I was out. We were talking about Noah. And there might have been a couple different episodes that you guys had of that one, but so a couple things that will lead into this attributes of manhood and really going down the captain's log story. You guys had Sail of Grace a couple months ago. What has that meant to your family and how do your kids feel about Sail of Grace and how are you and your wife doing that? Yeah. How are you as a man showing up for your 4 children? Well, I'd say primarily for your wife and then your 4 children. Because, Jesus came to serve and not be served. And we as men, we work a hard day. We come home and we want to be served, right? Yeah. So how do you set aside what it is you desire and go serve your family? Because that's where you're leading us to as men. Yeah. It's not easy. I don't always want to come home. And there's an acronym I just share with you. I may have shared it last time, but HALT, H-A-L-T. Have you ever heard of that one?
I've not.
So at the end of the day, when you're hungry, angry, lonely, or tired, that's when you got to be careful. It's like when you want to come home, plop down on the couch, watch ESPN or whatever and be served. But that's actually when we're called to serve our family. So, when you're hungry, when you're angry, when you're lonely, or when you're tired, those things affect us. Yeah. It could be one, could be all 4. So for me, I have to be very careful about my attitude. Yeah. And so, all right. So lead us in.
I love HALT, man. I mean, that's an acronym that'll definitely hit there. And I hear definitely certain, men that are like, usually I got to take 5 minutes in the driveway just to decompress and then I'm game on, I
was talking to a guy yesterday, a guy I work with, and, how do we decompress from a day of work and then transition to a magically wonderful husband at home and a father? And I'll be honest with you, sometimes it's almost impossible. So what is that transitional piece? Is it going to the gym first? Is it going for a run, going for a walk, praying? What is that? Again, I don't know the answer. But for me, there is a transitional period of time where I'm doing something before I walk in my house just to make sure my head's right. And I don't always do it perfectly, but that is the goal. Yeah. But, well, lead us through, your last book. Yeah. You're doing this new Bible study. And by the way, I was encouraged. I show up at your Bible study, you get to meet your dad. That was cool. Met some other men. And then you led us in worship. You're playing guitar, you're singing. Dude, you're gifted. I'm really, really jealous. In a biblical way. Yeah, Is there biblical jealousy?
Maybe sure. Right?
Maybe sure. But no, I was really encouraged by that because you have some really good, awesome, amazing gifts that God's gifted you with. And you're not wasting those. You're not burying your talents or your giftings, you're actually using those.
Yeah.
You know, at 7:30 at night on a Monday when you'd probably rather be home relaxing. So walk us through that. You know, what does that mean to you and why are you doing it?
I think that's the biggest pull for men is because I see myself. It's like, dude, do I have anything left at 7:30? Especially to like wrestle with the deep things of God. I don't. And I know that other men don't either. A lot of the men have kids at home. They've just had it's Monday, so they probably had the worst work day of the week, and then I'm going to come here. I get the sacrifice, right? But many times, I mean, what's more of this kind of this sacrifice of praise or sacrifice to God? Like, hey, I'm given to you, God, and then I need something in return. And so there's this, I guess, this simultaneous thing of where so many times, and I'm 100% guilty of this, is that I may shut down and may consume what pop culture says is a good relaxing time, a good movie, a good Netflix show, a good binge watch, maybe some good dialogue. If I have enough energy to have a good dialogue with my wife, that would be great. But I would say usually it's kind of wasted, you know? And so we kind of just pass our evenings off to, I won't say the enemy, but I will say we pass it off to just, all right, culture, whatever, you know, wherever you take me. Anyways, my end game here is to get some sleep, right? And so I just need to shut down and kind of wind down. And so I could almost argue that it's kind of amoral. It's like, you know, whatever, our evenings might be amoral. There's not really this kind of defined term there. And so in some ways it's like, hey, can I pull something back from the enemy? Can I take maybe something back where maybe we in faith offer a little bit enough for us? In this last session on Monday night, it was like, God, for the sacrifice that the men in here have given to come here, and I know what that sacrifice is, please multiply it. Right, much like the prayer was just like the boy offered his 5 loaves of bread and 2 fish. God multiplies it, and I'm gonna follow up with the guys obviously in the next session. How was the multiplication? You sacrificed a Monday evening. Did God give you the strength for the week? Where our big prayer that night was, hey God, let this Monday night feel like a Friday night. Let this Monday night and let it feel like a weekend. You know, let us sense your Spirit moving through us. And so it's that kind of quickening that says, hey, I'm not qualified to be the father that is necessary to raise 4 kids. So if I'm already not there, and you just said, what is it? He calls the unqualified. He doesn't qualify the uncalled, or however it goes.
Yeah, he qualifies the called, or he doesn't qualify. He doesn't call the qualified. He qualifies the called.
Yeah, so good. So, I like how I kind of I messed it up for you.
Yeah, that's okay.
Yeah, so that's been a huge push. I would say definitely kind of at the apex of what Captain's Log has been about. And I think at its heart, as I now jump out into book 2, I'm working on chapter 1, and it's been eye-opening and encouraging kind of for where Attributes of Manhood is at. And at any given point, the aim of this Attributes of Manhood, actually of Captain's Log, is that men would feel they have a voice. So there will be a main focus on a certain attribute that a man of God would possess. And then at the end, we have this discussion kind of around it, and usually it can go about 20 to 30 minutes. And what the joy inside of me, which is the same thing that I feel when I'm sitting and I'm aroused for God, right, by some powerful message or some powerful something, but it stays in the pew, it stays in the chair, and it doesn't get to go anywhere, and then I leave. But there's this activation that happens in discussion where there are men that I respect to the nth degree, and I know in many ways they have more knowledge than the thing I just spoke about. And so what is more powerful than, number one, challenging what's been said, to affirm the truth of Scripture theologically, and then number two, also encouraging what has been said in all of us, and we hold each other accountable. So what is more powerful than talking about the faith of Noah and then asking all the men there, what is your ark? And are you going to step out on that ark? Even though you may not see anything for 55 years, 75 years. And so then we get invited into this quest of, I want to hold you accountable to your ark, to your faith that you're going, even though there may be mockery and people may say, dude, what are you doing? There was 5 people there. Dude, but that was the size of the ark, 6 people when Noah accomplished his greatest thing. Jesus had 12 disciples. He didn't have a massive army, which, as we all know, he could have. What is so ironic to me is that Jesus could have had the most successful kingdom that would have stood for eternity. And I in my head, I'm perplexed because I'm like, God, why would that not be your play? Because in my mind, I think in most of our minds, logically, it just makes sense.
Totally.
If you can, you and you'd also have perfect followers. I know that Jesus is so perfect, and this is a claim here, right? We could take the worst people throughout history, that if Hitler came in, and I'm Hitler or Saddam Hussein, or if they came into contact with the actual Jesus, my next submission, my next claim would be that even they could not refuse him if he performed his whatever, not just signs, because he also refutes that theologically. But the basis for my claim here is that the difficulty I think that only Jesus would know is that if Hitler, somebody that wouldn't actually love Jesus genuinely, then would only actually be a fan. He wouldn't be a follower, right? And so I think Jesus knows this is the only way he could do it, so that his signs and miracles didn't just create fans that follow him and adhere to him, because like, how can I not? We all love Michael Jordan. He's too incredible. Patrick Mahomes, take whatever celebrity you want, or crazy athlete who performs these amazing feats. It's like, duh, there's no question. I think he's amazing, and there's a tinge of worship that wells up inside of me when I hear Adele sing this a crazy beautiful song. I'm moved, but I don't want to fall on the sword for that person.
Right.
And so I think there's this thing that only God knew, that if I show him my glory, I will only create fans, not followers. And this is kind of that piece for me where Jesus could have done this thing, but if he sets up his kingdom on earth the way that we think so, it's obviously not in God's design. Yeah. And so there's this shift that I want God to, I believe God is moving where it doesn't, in order for this faith piece, this follow of Christ to look good, it doesn't have to be viral. It doesn't have to be 1 billion likes. Now, the outcome of all that is in his hands. So he gets to do whatever he wants with that. But that's this quest where I'm on, where it's like, men, I want to awaken all of us, because we need to get this idea that if we're going to have this great idea and step out, it better also go viral. It better also have this amazing thrust behind it. And I think Jesus is saying, no, pursue me. Let me take care of the outcome, right? Pursue me, step out in faith, build your ark. It's funny. I didn't expect this to be kind of focused on the ark, but it's flowing with me right now. So,
So this Bible verse on my phone, it's Matthew 6:33. It says, "Seek first His kingdom and His righteousness, and all these things will be added unto you." There's nothing else.
Yeah,
there is nothing else. You bring in some really valid points. Yeah, Jesus had 12 disciples, and Noah had 6 or 8 family. Yeah, that made it before God shut the door on the ark.
Yeah.
What you're saying is that we don't need to go viral and be famous, but we do need to be not just a fan, but a follower of Jesus.
Yeah.
That's like a book title. Are you a fan or are you a follower? Something like that.
That's real good. You might have just had it.
Yeah. So real quick, your new book, your first book was Attributes of Manhood.
Yeah.
The second book is called what?
Well, it's supposed to be volume 2.
Okay.
So at this point, the aim is Attributes of Manhood. Haven't figured out the subheading, or if it's just going to say volume 2 on it. Still wrestling through that. Had the 5 chapters. We're in the middle of research, that kind of thing. Definitely on chapter 1. It's been a great process because as you go through, you begin any journey, it's not going to look the same by the time as to where you end up.
Yeah.
And so what's great is because I want this thing, once again, it has to flow from the Spirit of God. That's the only reason I would want to waste anybody's time to read it. And obviously heavy research and we don't throw our intellect to the wind. Like that's definitely not what I'm after. But I want something that can actually encourage men and be viable yet again. And so this first chapter that I'm working on, I'll just pull back the cover a little bit, but it's on contentment. And it's been really powerful in my life. And I believe that these things can be so moving, on a level that is unheard of by establishing value once again to the things that God values, So
a couple questions. Chapter 1 on contentment. What verse does that coincide with? I'm sure there's probably a Bible verse somewhere in there.
For sure.
And then secondly, why do you call your Bible study Captain's Log?
Yeah, no, exactly. Well, I'm going to, we'll throw it out to my good buddy. I definitely want to throw it out to him because he was the founder of the name. It was like I was wrestling with my friend of what can I call this, because I don't want to call it a devotional because that doesn't excite me as a man, and I don't think it excites most men. I don't want to do a devotional. Like what is this any good? And so immediately off the cuff, Michael Barco just said it's captain's log. And this is a skill set he possesses. I don't know what I'd call it, but it's just like, dude, seriously? It's branding, I think, is a skill set, he definitely possesses. So shout out to you, Michael Barco. So Captain's Log. And what else is Captain's Log supposed to elicit but that you've just had a great adventure and you're documenting your adventure. And so for the man of God, Captain's Log is just a documentation of your adventures with him, right? And it's the same template I use to write the first attributes of manhood. And so following into the second one, that's definitely kind of that piece there. And hopefully it excites men. Captain's Log is a continuation of more attributes than what I've just covered. So my first book covered 5, and for every man who fills out, there's 10 options to fill out 10 attributes. And each one, I believe, is yet another definition of what a man looks like under God. And it should be endless. God has so many great attributes to be able to that we mirror, because we're obviously made in the image of God, that we mirror about our Creator. So the things that we get to possess as men then are also possessed by God, our Savior, right? And so that's this huge piece that I think Captain's Log is really supposed to aim at. Speaking of contentment, on which verse it was, Philippians 11 through 13.
Philippians 4?
Yeah, Philippians 4, 11 through 13. I'm not saying this because I am in need, for I have learned to be content, whatever the circumstances. I know what it is to be in need, and I know what it is to have plenty. I have learned the secret of being content in any and every situation, whether well-fed or hungry, whether living in plenty or living in want. And I want to hold off on that last portion.
I know it's coming.
It's coming. Of course you do. Because I've only ever used that last verse for accomplishment, for achievement, for doing great things, right? So let's just shelve that. We still haven't, pulled back the veil, and we're chomping at the bit to be able to know what the following verse is. But this piece here, I've learned this secret. All my life, when I'd hear that, I'd be like, what was Paul talking about? What secret of contentment do you know that I don't know? But I never looked any deeper, right? So finally, I think it was a year ago or whatever, I decided to look deeper. The Greek word there is mueu, and it means to initiate into the mysteries a lesson, right? That's the uncovering of that. And what do you have to have if you're going to have a lesson? You have to have a teacher, right? Somebody that's not you. You have to have a credible, authoritative figure, right? And then to initiate into the mysteries means you have to have an initiator. It's like a key to a car. Like if you don't have a key, you cannot turn on a car. And I'm not saying you can rip open the spark plugs. Like you don't get to be MacGyver and all this stuff, right? Or James Bond. And so this fascinating piece that I said was that I discovered here through Paul's writing is, wow, I don't have any access on my own to be content. It is impossible for me to achieve contentment. It has to come from outside of myself. So I was so perplexed because as I'm wrestling with this concept, it's like, all right, God, so there is this thing that is impossible to get to, which means I want it even more now. So what are we going to do, God? Right? So Paul then elicits this beautifully, saying the only access we have to contentment is to have access to the author of contentment, to the fulfillment of, right? This crazy interesting thing that we get when we look at achieving contentment. So if we desire contentment on our own, we're never going to get to it. It's that thing that's always out of reach. I think of the Buddhist monk in the, high mountains of Asia, always pursuing this nirvana, which is, obviously freedom from desire, right? God doesn't want that. He wants us to have desire still. He created it. And this is what I argue with in the book, is that contentment is the guard of desire, right? It's a limiting agent, that would keep it at bay. Because if desire left unchecked is just dangerous, you will never be fulfilled. Because if you have 1 million,
we want more,
right? You nailed it, right? There's no fulfillment there. But then there's this weird thing, because if I have contentment, I do not need the $1 million to feel like I just had $1 million, and I will never want more of the $1 million for fulfillment if I accept this place of contentment that can only be granted by God, right? And so this crazy thing. So now we're going to get to Philippians 4:13.
Yeah.
I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me.
But most people just live on that.
Yeah, exactly.
But we miss the whole context.
And I would say that before every test, I'd say, don't worry, I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. It was about achievement. Before a game, I'd be like, hey, I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. It was achievement, right? And I think actually, if we take it in context and the way Scripture was written, it doesn't have all these breaks. Like it's a flow, it's a follow through. It's simultaneously actually has to do with abasement. I can be great with less. I can achieve more with less. It's not about me adding to myself. It's actually about me subtracting from myself in context of this. I can do all things through Christ. It's actually like, wow, you know what, God? Everything in me wants a mansion, but somehow I can feel more fulfilled by not getting the mansion and being content in my 1,000 square foot home. I won't call it a shack because we're in America. So this 1,000 square foot apartment, and it's like, dude, wait, how in the world? Because it's so miraculous. How can I have access to more joy than the millionaire down the street in his mansion? So that's kind of this idea that I wrestle with.
Wow. Then you go back to like Philippians 4:4. Paul saying, "Rejoice in the Lord always." Again, I say, rejoice. We can just pause right there and just like. That's it. That's a mic drop right there, what Paul said. But then he continues going on through that whole message. I don't think I ever knew that the contentment was really outside my reach. I thought it was something I just need to be content, and that there's probably some truth to that, but that's not necessarily what you're saying.
Yeah, just based on what Paul was alluding to, in kind of in that the original translation, and I find it very encouraging for myself because we've all met. Whether we've served him in our workplace, we've met the millionaire who's like, dude, why are you so grumpy? Like, you just pulled up in a Jaguar.
Well, how about the billionaires that are in a submarine right now?
Yeah.
And they have no oxygen.
Yeah.
Money, I was reading in Proverbs this morning that, pursuing riches, it flies away, and it's not what we should be about, but being content. Okay, so this all sounds good, Mitch. It sounds like we have this all figured out. But how are you doing in your real life? I mean, if we're being honest, you're a guy like me. Do you struggle with this?
Yeah. For sure. There's zero question. It's like the aim of every man is to definitely achieve these virtues.
Yeah.
The cool thing is I end the first book with the Spirit of God, right? There is nothing we can achieve without the Spirit of God. So it is a constant wrestling, and I find that whenever I embark on a journey, I have more affliction in that pursuit than ever, right? So if I'm trying to scout, God, what are the secrets of contentment? He wants to try to afflict you with saying, you need more. You need to get out of this. If you hate your career position, then you're like, no, I need something else. Contentment can sit there, right? And then you can begin, you know what, God, I'm gonna go ahead and be content and glad. And I think the reason why God might love contentment so much, it's because it's an admission of our incapability, right, to accomplish. And it's like, God, I gotta give it to you.
Well, I think what I'm learning here, and I need to go back and do my own study, but the word virtue, a virtue is not something I possess. A virtue is something I'm given by God. And so what you're saying is contentment is not something I can conjure up on my own. Oh, just be happy, be content.
Yeah.
That's what I'm hearing. Is that?
That's it, man.
Wow, I don't think I actually ever got that. That's That's interesting.
Well, because you think there is this crazy thing that if I, and usually the greatest thoughts I have are when I'm like, sitting down on the couch, not doing a whole lot. You're just wrestling with your thoughts. And so if I per se want a Corvette, which I could, right?
Yeah.
And I sit there and I will, I don't want the Corvette. That inherently a desire is stemming from I want this. Which means if I want it, I do not possess the ability to not want it. I liken it to appetites and hunger. It's kind of like if I think about willing my hunger away. Now I'm sure that I think it's David Goggins. Isn't it David Goggins?
Goggins or?
Yeah, Goggins. Cheap. I should know this.
Maybe so.
Yeah, well, he's kind of the forerunner of just denial of self, like cold ice baths. I think he's climbed Everest in his bare feet. So he possesses a very strong will, which is I'm not faulting that at all. There's another virtue that goes alongside with that, like self-discipline and all that. But in the context of contentment, if I like something, it means I already possess the inability to not like it. This odd thing, you're not necessarily a content person if you just naturally don't desire a mansion. Like if your personality says, you know what, I don't really want a bigger house anyways, you can't claim contentment simultaneously. I hope I'm making sense.
Yeah.
The only time contentment is verified is when you actually have something you want, and then you simultaneously say, you know what, I'm cool without it.
Because without the two differences, you can't have contentment because there would be no need.
Yep. Yeah, for sure.
Ooh.
I don't really have any desire at this point to join the octagon in UFC.
Really? You sure?
I just don't, right? I kind
of secretly do, but
I have a fantasy to be Conor McGregor, but I can't handle the hits. I can't.
No.
I just couldn't handle it in any world, right? So, but if I said, you know what, I'm going to give up that dream, I'm not enacting contentment to be fine without it because I don't actually want it.
Right.
I have to want the thing.
Before you cannot want it.
Before I cannot want it, which means it is incapable in me to be able to be content about a thing that I don't want. And I know that, the word salad there could be a bit puzzling to follow. But this is the beauty of why I think to achieve contentment from a desire, you would, if you're being intellectually honest, you have to have somebody else give it to you. You have to have something from outside of yourself, a piece of the divine that would drop contentment for you and say, you know what, Mitch, that's okay. You don't need that. What you need is me. Because obviously there's a quote by St. Augustine, and he says, the soul is restless until it finds its rest in the Creator, right? And that's kind of this
restless until it finds its rest in the Creator.
Yeah,
man.
Yeah, and that's contentment, right? It's like we're finding our rest in God. It's like, God, actually, I don't need that thing.
Yeah.
I find my rest in you. I find my soul is at peace. It's fully contented in you. You know? Yeah.
You know what's cool about this here, Mitch? I think every 6 months you and I are going to have this podcast because there's a lot of depth. You're a deep thinker. I sometimes don't think my thinking's very deep. I'm probably middle of the road, but you're a really deep thinker, and you're causing me to think. I'm pretty sure a lot of people on this podcast will be going like, holy cow. But I think every 6 months you and I should hop back on here.
I love it,
and figure out where you're at. What's God working with you? What book are you on? Lord willing.
Yeah, Lord willing, man.
I'm encouraged, man.
So good.
You're a good brother, man. You really care about men, even though you have a fourth now baby, and you and your wife are probably exhausted, but you're still doing it, man. So I appreciate your faithfulness to the Lord, to men, to your family. How do we encourage you, man, to keep on the same road? Because there's discouragement in life. There's discontentment if we aren't being surrounded by men. How do we pray for you?
Yeah, I think the heart of me is that I'm prone to the same proclivities that every man is also pulled to, right? Is prone to. Mm-hmm. And I don't want to deny or fall to, I guess, the exhaustion of believing, where once again, back to just kind of this process of, will I stay the course? I simultaneously have been really doing a lot of research on failed successful ministries. And they burden my soul because these were leaders in the faith in our current culture that led us well. You could argue that led us really well, but then they fell to their own passions, to their own urges, at the end proving at the end of the day that they were human just like the rest of us, right? So on this quest to make an impact, we as men, we embrace a lot. We put a target on our back, right? Yeah. And I think for me, I don't, without God, I don't possess the necessary attributes to be what any man should be in setting out on a path of pursuit in righteousness. It's so interesting because most endeavors that are not necessarily of God, doesn't mean they're evil, but like if you start out a business that's not stating to be a Christian business or whatever, you kind of go out on your talent. You're qualified, right? But the challenge when we set out on making a difference in Christ is that none of us are qualified.
Yeah.
And so a person who may happen to possess, and I'm not going to say any names on this, but there's been 10 massive ministries. We're talking thousands, 15,000 member-sized churches that have just fallen to such scandal, right? And I don't necessarily fault the leaders because they're just human, right? And they failed. They had a sincere heart, and we have to definitely shift this piece. And I think the prayer for me is that I would have the whatever desire inside that needs to stay the course, so that number one, I can be fine with pursuing God's call in obscurity.
Yeah.
That's a challenge for me. Could I stay the course if Captain's Log never went past 10 people? That's the heart that I want. Like that's the desire.
Yeah.
That's the desire I want, because I think God would say at the point of 10 people, it's the most successful it will ever be in His eyes. It's the most pleasing, right? Because that is that point where I have the most faith because I'm believing for God to move, and simultaneously He is saying, no, but I love 10 people. We can go deep with 10 people.
Yeah.
At 10,000 people, we embrace a different challenge, and 10,000 people might be more of a, as the proverbist would say, the crucible for silver and the furnace for gold, but man is tested by the praise he receives. I would say that's the fire, because that's a different battle. But for here, I want to stay the course so badly inside that I would listen to the call of God and fulfill the following the destiny in obscurity. And I'd encourage that for all men, that we would begin to pray and hold each other accountable, that we can stay the course, because nobody sees the sacrifices we make in our marriage. The most valuable things, nobody sees the sacrifices we make for our kids, right? And so the things that are most valuable, usually, as we know, they're always done in secret, right? And so I want prayer for that. I want to be genuine in the quiet place, So for whatever that's worth, I thank you for asking, for sure.
Well, the listeners on this podcast, I would ask that they would pray for you too, Mitch, and me, as men, as leaders, as husbands, as fathers, that we finish well. Yeah. So, brother, thanks for this time, man. It's been great to reconnect with you. And in 6 months, dude, we're going to hop back on here, see where Mitch is at. By then, your book will hopefully have been written, completed, Lord willing. And thanks to all the guests that listen every week, man. We really appreciate you as always. We do hope and pray this impacts somebody, whether it's one person or 10,000. We don't want to just make fans. We want to make followers of Jesus. I love that, by the way. Well, brother, thanks for coming on. We appreciate you, and we'll be praying for you.
Buddy, I can't thank you enough. Blessings, man.
Yeah, thank you.